Oh, I did come in my computer. Do it up here? Oh. Oops. I got home like me and Gary went to Decatur. To Decatur and my brothers, and then I like 6 o'clock when I got home. I like open up my bag. Lisa's like, you know, we're taken, but yeah, but so, you know, like, you know, how I get on there. Yeah. Renee has jury duty this week. Aw, I know. I think I can't talk about it. Every time I get a letter, I get. Every time you get a letter, what? To go for jury duty, yeah, I always get one letter in my whole life. Well, that's when I lived in California, and it was like, hey, you know, jury duty, and it was like 4 weeks out. Totally forgot about it. And I was like, when I realized that, like, found the letter, like in the stack, like, no, I didn't, but I was like, oh my gosh, but it, and I like was waiting, you know, anything could happen, and I was like, yeah, yeah. I'm like, nothing ever happened, and I was like, I probably didn't have to report or something and just lucked out, you know what I mean? Like, but I've never been called here. Brad's been called like 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, what the heck? Yeah. Kind of unfair. It's not unfair. It's not fun to sit. You what? It's not fun to sit. I know. I don't know what is next. I saw your text this weekend. I was hoping Ashley. About that. Yeah, Renee might know because it was a book Renee was reading. Was actually in that text. I started thinking about it earlier, and I was like, well, she watch it in my own. Was it a different one? It was the books and pickles. That maybe that was the baby shower. I saw actually, but it might have been actually Rodriguez. I didn't really pay attention to the spelling. Yes, he's not. I'll put it in her book later. I started Macmillan Flynn one. Like the book. I haven't read it, the last book. No. I started. She wrote Dawn Girl and Sharp Objects. Oh. Yeah, she's a good writer. Like, but yeah, this book's not good. Zoomland. Oh, yeah, he's at home today. It's gross out again. Yeah. It's not that rainy. Classes, where's everybody? Like a few raindrops? I'm here. Yes, I know. She's in her office, I think. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yay, and I can hear you. It's often yay, it's often not as easy. Let me give me just one more minute before I start. This one is not gonna be an hour long, so
Goof off.
to totally move on.
No buyers, I've got. On the bench.
Yeah, so today I just kind of wanted to go over, I mean, we've mentioned these programs and stuff, but I kind of just wanted to go into a little more detail, answer questions on them. The three main grant programs that we have.
Yeah.
And then, I also brought a 2-1, like a buy down calculator to walk through with you guys, like for the temporary buy down, because, we're still doing those. And sometimes it's great for the first time home buyer, especially with the payment, just, to help them.
Yeah.
Maybe take the plunge if it's like, oh, well, the payment's better for the first couple of years. So I kind of thought that would be a good thing to walk through and a good refresher as well, so. All right, well, I will get started, y'all. Thank you for joining in person in April and Rachel. Thank you guys on Zoom as well. So, like I said, this one is just kind of geared more toward first time home buyers, but also maybe people that are a little bit on the fence. And just need a little extra nudge, or reason to take that plunge. So camera is not looking at your face and you can only see like. I'm just not in picture. But I don't see, you can't see your face, but from there. Even while I'm actually talking, does it move? You just sent me a picture. Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, I don't know. Is he talking? Because I can't hear. No, he's not talking, but there you are. Well, I'm sorry, the camera, I think sometimes when there's like. Not as many people in here or something, it has a hard time. It's showing the back of me in April. It'll move around.
It's all good.
Sorry if you watched my legs while we're talking. Apologies. All right, so the first one I want to go over is the Freddie Mac borrow. So this is one, all of these are going to be conventional loans. This is the one you probably hear us talk about the most. This is a $3,000 grant. Basically, 1,500 of it comes from Freddie Mac and 1,500 of it comes from us as the lender. So the 3,000 total. It's going to basically is the one that goes the highest in the income caps, meaning the buyers can make up to $144,000 and still qualify for this one. So if you've had much experience with either grant program or first time buyer credits and stuff, a lot of times they're going to have an income cap, meaning you come in here making 200,000, you're not getting assistance, right? First world problems, but this one actually goes the highest of any of the ones I've ever seen. So it's certainly the highest of ours. So it's $3,000 as long as they are a first time home buyer, one person on the loan. So if you've got two people, but one isn't, but one is, you can still qualify for that. But the total income on the loan has to be 144 or less. Some little tweaks we can do on that if someone works over, if they've got overtime income or commission income and base income, if we can qualify them on maybe not all of it to try to get that amount, that number down under the 144, we can do that. So unlike some of the other grant programs out there where it's like household income, even if you're not on the loan, if their income is in the house, you have to count it toward that cap. This one is very flexible. Basically, they're saying only the income you're using for qualifying is counted, and only that income has to be under 140. So we've done that before where it's like, hey, we can use the base salary and not all the extra variable income just to keep them under as long as they qualify. So that gives us some flexibility on that front, which is really, really nice. Let's see here. The other perk to this one is that the interest rates are a little bit better than the standard rates. So again, this is conventional. LLPAs are waived, and what an LLPA is a loan level pricing adjustment, which means when we go to price the loan, meaning pull a rate for somebody, the system asks all sorts of things. It's looking for how much is the down payment, what's the loan amount, there's a sweet spot for loan amount to get the best pricing. Obviously, credit score is the biggest driver, and that's usually gonna be the biggest loan level pricing adjustment, meaning if you've got a lower credit score, you've got a pricing adjustment on your loan, which makes your rate higher, or your costs higher for the same rate as someone with a better credit score. So, but there are different loan level pricing adjustments, in every file. Those are waived, meaning someone with an 800 credit score and someone with a, 680 credit score on this one can still get the same rate. So you're pretty much saying, hey, whatever normally would bump your rate up on an adjustment, it's not, they're not thinking about it here, it's not counted. Which helps a lot of people have a better than market rate. If you're coming in with the best credit, everything's perfect, your rate's good still, but you may be only waiving a couple small adjustments. So you're not getting as much of a benefit as someone with even an average credit. Even if you're in the mid 700s, you're still getting a break on this because of the low level price adjustments. So this is Freddie Mac. So there's two conventional investors or backers, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. So this has to be for Freddie Mac because this is a Freddie Mac brand, not Fannie. The only time you've ever really experienced, hey, who cares? Is there a difference? The biggest time is when we have condos involved. So condominiums have that separate condo approval. Fannie and Freddie, almost identical requirements for the condos, but sometimes we'll have a condo that one of them approves and one of them doesn't, based on whatever their approval guidelines are. Freddie tends to be a little bit stricter on things like deferred maintenance for the building. That's usually the biggest one. Both of them are pretty much the same on insurance now. But so there have been times where we were planning to take a borrower this route, and if it's a condo and it's not approved Fannie or Freddie, but it is Fannie, we have to flip over, that credit goes away. So just keep in mind, the one thing to keep in mind is if it's a condo. If it's not a condo, there's really no reason that they couldn't do Freddie if they could, one or the other. So that's usually the only difference there. The MI is the other thing that's a little bit lower. So again, another perk there, because MI also has the level pricing adjustment. So the lower your credit score, the higher MI is. So on this one, you're going to have better than market MI, better than the standard MI rates as well. See here. So those are the main perks of the Borrow Smart, which is probably, I don't want to say it's our favorite one to do, but it's the one we can do the most. Because it's got the biggest qualifying window, if that makes sense, because of that income. Any question on Borrow Smart? Okay. Next one. This one is called Res Source, and this one is going to be up to $5,000. So Res Source is actually a Fannie Mae product, and it kind of goes in conjunction with Home Ready, if you're familiar with that at all, which is not a grant program, but Home Ready is more lower rate, lower MI, that kind of a thing, again with an income cap. Home Ready does not have to be a first-time buyer product, and this one is basically Borrow Smart is geared more toward, hey, we're going to give you $3,000, usually it's total closing costs, just because that's where they can put it. Res Source is actually kind of touted or marketed as your buyers can do as little as 1%. So meaning that all the money from this one can absolutely be toward down payment. It says as low as 1% down payment because basically this will pay 2% of their down payment or $5,000, whichever is less. So if they're buying a house that's, $500,000 and 2% of that is $10,000, it's not going to pay 2%. It's only going to pay up to $5,000. So to truly have a 1% down payment, you really have to be buying a house that's $250,000 or less. So this one, the biggest kicker is the income cap is lower. It's the same as the Home Ready one, which is right around 82,000. So again, in line with sort of the price range that they're targeting for the 1% down payment, because if you are making less than 82,000, you're probably not buying a $500,000 house. So it kind of goes hand in hand. But this is so your first time buyers, maybe they're buying a condo, or maybe they're looking for a home that is in that 200s range. This is a good option for them. With the $5,000, so it's $5,000. So not really a whole lot to talk about on this one, other than the income cap and the amount of money.
And the income cap is for one person.
It's the same as however many are on the loan.
Okay.
So again, it's not looking at anyone who's not on the loan, like some of the down payment programs, assistance programs look at where they're doing household.
Yeah.
Even USDA does that. Even if you're not on the loan, but you're in the house, your household income is going toward that income, toward the calculation to make sure you're not exceeding the income cap. These loans are all going to be whatever the qualifying income is that's being used for the loan, whether it's one person, two people, whatever. That's what can't be over the cap for these. This one, again, better rate, better MI, all of that stuff is still true. It just is a way to offer more money. Now, if they're doing, say the house is or the condo or whatever they're buying is 200 grand, they're only going to get 4,000. So they're not going to get 5,000 if that's more than 2%. So just remember that one. Up to 5 is the key term on that.
I'm sorry, you said up to 4% overall.
Up to 2%. 2% or $5,000, whichever is lower. So they're gonna max at 5 grand. Thanks. And also, just so you guys know, all of these are the flyers I just wanted to show you. I've sent these to agents maybe that are having buyer consults, that's a first time buyer. We can totally send these to you so you can either have that to stick in there for them. So just let me know. Last but not least of our grant program is the RES fund. This one is up to $8,000 in down payment and closing costs. So this is obviously our high ticket one. And we've closed them already. So it's a great loan product. This one does not have an income cap. Really, the only qualification on this one is where they're currently living, which is a little bit odd, but this is a geographical, where Fannie Mae is saying, hey, basically, we're looking at where people are buying homes, we're looking at, the statistics of certain areas that have low home ownership rates. So they're pretty much targeting these specific places and saying, okay, if the borrower lives in that area currently, then they can qualify for this. Now, the kicker is they don't have to buy in that same area. They can buy wherever they want. But if they're currently living in one of the areas that are on this map, then they would qualify for this.
Are there general maps we can use to?
I wish this was the first thing we asked.
Now we go, oh, why do we qualify for this? How come I didn't qualify?
Yeah, I think you can always say, there is one program, like if you're referring them over to the, they've got a few different programs. It's got, qualification is gonna be based on either income, or where you're currently living, different loans, so that you're not too in the weeds with it, but just letting them know, talk to her, see what you might qualify, see if you qualify for those. Because even on the very first phone call I have with someone, even if they haven't done an application, with this one, all I need to know is their address. So even if they haven't gone through the step of filling out an app and sending documents and stuff, which I would need for the other ones because they're income driven. One is like, hey, what's your address? I can type it in our system and look and see if it's part of it. There is a map floating around, but they've already changed the areas since that map was created. So it's outdated and it didn't technically come from them.
Loading targets.
Yes and no. It's not, but they did change it from the original one, and someone created a map on the original one. And then they came in and made some adjustments to some of the areas. So now that one and only map I had seen isn't all that accurate. So again, the best course of action is really refer them on over and say, hey, talk to Erin, see if you could qualify for any of these things. And then, I can run their address. So, that one closing, well, Rachel and I closed one that did this one. And then I've got another, what? Barely, yeah.
And that.
No, that's. Yeah, that's qualifying for that. Well, it was because they ended up buying a manufactured home, what was technically a manufactured home, and that had its own requirement. And the loans that usually goes in wasn't this. So we had to figure out a way to be like, how can we merge both products? And we did.
She did it.
We did it. But yeah, this is just a great one because again, doesn't matter what their income is. So if you've got those people that have a high income, but they happen to be living in one of these areas. So, and this one again can be used toward down payment and closing costs. So if you get this one and you get seller pay closing costs on your contract, they can use all of that because this can then be applied to their down payment and they don't have to bring all the down payment. So, this one's an awesome one. It's just not going to be, everyone's not going to qualify. I think. So any questions on res fund? Again, this one is gonna be, actually 5,000, so it's always split what the total amount comes from. So it's up to 8,000, so 5,000 of it is a grant from bank. The other up to 3 is gonna be 1% of down payment, basically 1% of the purchase price. So if the house is 300,000 or more, then they're gonna be able to get the whole 8. So they're always gonna get the 5 and then up to 1% on the other end. So like, the other one I've got now, they're buying a house that's only like 285, so they're not getting a full 8, they're getting closer to, 7 something. Because they're getting the 5 and they're getting 1% of whatever I think it's actually 1% of your loan amount is what they're getting for the rest of their grants, not to exceed 3 grand. So 8's gonna be the most, but sometimes they might get, 65, 7,500 instead of 8 if their purchase price is. So that's one thing to remember. Okay, so those are the 3 main grant programs that we have. They're all really good. We're looking at those on everyone. Obviously, the first thing we're asking is, even on an initial call, are you a first-time home buyer? Because we want to know, really, if they know much about buying a house, if they've ever done this before, but then also, should we be looking at talking about these programs for them? So that's definitely the first thing we're always asking our people. And even if they don't say anything, if they do an application first and they're a first-time buyer, we're looking to see, hey, can they qualify for it? So we're always looking to see, can we get them the money toward their purchase? So it's not like you have to ask or they have to ask, hey, are there any programs? And they always do, but we're automatically trying to see if we can get them some money. So those are first-time home buyer programs. The other thing I really wanted to go over with you guys today, and this is something that I feel like we've been going over more again lately, is the temporary buy downs. So we all know there's permanent buy downs, which is where you're actually just buying the interest rate down, right? They're paying additional discount points and buying that rate down. That's going to be locked at that lower rate. So that's the permanent buy down. It's just these temporary buy downs, I kind of want to go over some of the math. So I've talked through some people or through this with more people probably in the last couple of months than I had about most of the second half of last year. So I wanted to bring this out. Also, listing agents, if you're listing a property too, and maybe it's not moving, I actually created this for an agent last week because she came to me and she was like, hey, I got this listing. It's a great listing. It hasn't moved yet. It's been up for maybe a week or two. She's like, coming to really talk through ideas of how can we market it a little differently or something. What can we offer to try to help move it without just dropping the price rate? So this is a great one. This is where the seller is covering this cost. Or if you're going in as a buyer and you're making an offer, knowing what this might cost, because this is something that you could ask for too, if your buyers are, really payment conscious, they're gonna have to qualify at the regular note rate, but this is just something to help get them in there, maybe they feel more comfortable about it, having a lower payment for a couple of years. So this is the 2-1 buy down, and I've done different down payment amounts, so you can see 3%, 5%, 10, and 20, and the cost is gonna be different. So the less your buyer or the buyer's putting down, the bigger the cost is to buy that, to do that temporary buy, right? Because the loan amount's higher. That's really all it amounts to. So in this case, it was a $550,000 house. They really were trying to do something besides immediately drop the price. So, well, what about doing something like this, offering this, which would mean the seller's paying for it? So I ran this so that she could talk to the seller about it and say, okay, this is, if you're willing to do like 12 grand or something, it might be better than dropping the price to 20, whatever. And could generate some interest from people. Now, this does not have to be for first-time home buyers. So I know the first program we all talked about were first-time buyers. This is anybody. But this is kind of showing at the time, so if the rate was 7.25, this is the 2-1 buy down, which means year one, the rate is 2% lower than what the note rate is. Year two, the rate will be 1% lower. And in year 3 on, it's going to be the note rate, meaning what the rate really is today. So when we do one of these, we're locking in the loan at, in this case, the 7.25, because that's the market rate. But for year one, they're gonna pay the mortgage at a 5.25. And year two, they're gonna pay the mortgage at a 6.25. Then year 3 and on, it's gonna be 7.25. So this is a cool option because 2 things. This would be paid in this kind of scenario, we're saying, hey, the seller would be offering to pay for this. So it's just basically seller paid closing costs. So this can happen anytime you've got a buyer, if they're getting enough seller paid closing costs. General rule of thumb is going to be about 2.3% of the purchase price to cover a 2-1 buy down. So not even a whole 3% could get them this. So if you're looking at the top one, so say you've got the buyer, they're first timers, they're only putting out 3%. So it's going to be your most expensive option. It shows you that 7.21 is the note rate, or 7.25 is the note rate. So it shows you the P&I payment. So 36.39 is what the principal and interest payment is at the 7.25. So that's what their loan is actually going to be. But for year one, it's subsidized. And I say subsidized because that's really what the right word is. So this fee of $12,575. That's not really a fee, like a discount point, it's a fee paid to the lender. And that's it, right? You never see that again as a buyer. This fee is paid, but all it's doing is subsidizing their payment. So really, just like an escrow account is sitting, next to the mortgage with the lender with the taxes and insurance, this is almost put into a little mini escrow. So during year one, when they're paying a lower payment of $29.46 instead of the $36.39, they're saving $6.93 a month, right? So every month for the first 12 months, they're paying their mortgage of $29.46. Well, that $12,575 that the seller is paid in is sitting there with the lender. So the buyer pays in $29.46, then they pull $6.93 from that little escrow. So the lender's always getting $36.39. It's just not always coming from the borrower for year one. Then on year two, they're paying at a 6.25 rate, so they're paying a payment of $32.84, which means the $33.54.56 is coming from that little escrow account. So at the end of 2 years, all of that subsidy from the seller that they paid is used up, and now they're paying the full payment at 7.25, which is $36.39. So in this scenario, what I think one of the coolest parts about this is that obviously the buyers are more comfortable for the first couple of years getting into the house. I know that the economy and everything keeps changing and everyone is just waiting for the Fed to start cutting rates and to see those rates start to move down. But this buys 2 years at a lower rate, essentially, buyer. More than likely, rates will be better in 2 years where they would be wanting to rebuy. If that happens where the rates, maybe they're better in a year or 18 months, right? So they're still within that 2 years and they're still paying a lower payment. You know, one of the questions you might have is like, well, what happens to that money if it's sitting in a little escrow account? The coolest part of the temporary buy-downs is the buyer gets that. So if the 1 year in rates drop, they're like, hey, we could refinance to a, 5.5 and from the 7.25, we don't want to miss this, we want to do it. But we're only a year into our 2-year temp buy down. What happens? Well, whatever's left in there. So look at the boxes on the right, the breakdown for the subsidy. For year one, the subsidy amount, so the total is 12,575. Year one of that is 8,320. So say they went through year one. So year two, there's still 4254 left in there. So if they refi on, say, month 13, they still got 4,200 in there, that money is gonna go toward their payoff. So they will always get that money. So every single dollar of that 12,575, the buyer's going to get it one way or another. Versus a permanent buy down where maybe instead of the 7.25, they're like, hey, I want to go ahead and pay, a point, which is gonna be, $5,300 and buy my rate down to, a 7. That's fine, you can do that. You're obviously getting less bang for your buck for the first couple of years, but also if they refi after a year and a half, that 5,300, they never recouped it, right? Because they didn't have the home long enough or have the loan long enough to not only recoup the $5,300 they spent in one discount point, they're not gonna get their money back. Whereas in this scenario, they always get the money back, even if they refi before the time. So that's the 2-1 buy down. And you can see there's different, if they put down, say you got someone putting down 20%, now it's only $10,000, costs, because the load amounts lower. So 2-1 is not the only option. Maybe your seller looks at that, or, if you're on the buy side and the seller's just not willing to give that much. Then we can look at, there's a 1.5 half. So you can see that one at 3% down. This is all the same purchase price. It starts at 8,500. So it's less money because you're buying it down 1.5% for year one and only 0.5% for year two. So they're still saving money. They're saving over $500 on year one and $180 on year two every month on that payment, but it's costing about $4,000 less to do this scenario. Cheapest of all is the 1-0, which basically means, hey, you're buying it down 1 point per year. So this is a cool one. I mean, if you've got seller closing costs coming through, and maybe your buyer, if their biggest concern, usually we see buyers have either, let me put this with a little asterisk, everyone wants the lowest possible payment, right? So usually it's either, hey, what's most important to you as a buyer? I want my payment as low as possible, or I want my cash at close as low as possible. So it could depend. Hey, maybe they might be really tight on funds, so that just kind of automatically becomes the biggest deal or the biggest hot one. In which case, if they've got money coming from the seller, they probably don't want to use it for this. They want to use it to offset their cash. Like, hey, if the seller's giving me $5,000, I'm not going to do a temporary buy down. I'm going to just bring $5,000 less to closing, or maybe I need that $5,000, otherwise they can't make it. So that's a different scenario. If they've got the cash to close, but maybe you've worked out a deal where they still are getting some money from the seller, but maybe they're just, man, I really wish the payment was lower. That's more important to me, my monthly payment. Then this could be something we do with that money from the seller, instead of just using it to buy down the discount, for a quarter wage or something. Because again, just knowing where we are, and this is why this is still popular, it's because of where we are in the forecasted rate market. If we were in a place where we thought, hey, rates are going up, like where we were, a few years ago, then this was popular when the prices started shooting up, right after COVID 2021. This became popular just to keep people's payments down. But then after it was out for a while, as rates kept going up, yes, it's popular, but at the same time, if you're not planning on refining later, it doesn't necessarily help your buyers to know that okay, well, fine, I'm just kicking the can down the road, knowing that I'm still gonna have to pay 7% in 2 years. So it's really, I think what makes it popular now, or makes it a good help for getting them to kind of jump into the market if they're hesitant, is that, hey, for the next couple of years, we can keep your payment a little bit lower than, you're really not paying 7%. And then by the time that you would be, you're most likely gonna be able to refi into something that's not, yes.
This is what is happening right now with loans, you're seeing set. Like,
Yeah.
people getting set.
Yes, yes. So like some of the other ones, as far as where rates are right now, they're in the low sevens, they have come down the last couple of weeks. I mean, we were in the mid sevens.
Like, so.
Yep.
That's what they're getting.
It depends if they're buying, if they're paying a little bit of discount, you can get understanding, or you can get understanding. And especially with some of the first time programs that we talked about, when they don't have, that have the lower than market, like basically don't have the loan level pricing adjustment, those are understood. This was a week ago, this was before some of the job report and stuff last week that helped market. So if you got an 800 credit score, you can be better than some. And they can even buy that. We structure just like anything. So they can either do what's called a par rate, where they're not paying any discount at all, they're not, buying the rate down at all. Most of the time people pay it. Because to be honest, usually the rates are not priced to where there's actually a rate that's ceiling. It's usually like, hey, this rate, you pay a little bit, or if you don't want to pay anything at all, then we can go up a little bit, like up a beat, and then that might have a lender credit. It's just very rare that it's like, hey, this one's zero, meaning no credit, no discount.
Those numbers in green right there are the ones that I sent out, but the cost of having that.
The cost of purchasing the temporary buyout, exactly.
So if the seller is willing to give like in the example, number one, 4,200, they'll get it. They can get that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, so, and that's how you need to put, on a contract, you don't need to put, seller to pay for temporary buy down, well, you just say, seller contributing closing costs of blank, whatever the number is. And then therefore they can use it for this, or just cash to close, or whatever they want to use it for. But sometimes if you've got on the listing side, agents are kind of looking for another way to market it, rather than just saying, hey, we're offering closing costs. That's good too. But, sometimes just if you're targeting that hot button of, hey, I know this would be a great house for first time buyers. I know I'm getting a lot of first time buyers, or you're just in that area and or price point that is going to drive a lot of them. Sometimes this can help more with them, just because at least what we see, the rates, just that payment, the affordability factor getting into the market versus a few years ago, even when prices were higher, when rates were 3%, that house was so much more affordable than what it is now. So sometimes showing it that way and saying, hey, however you want to spin that, sellers agreeing to, pay for a temporary buy down, whatever, 2% rate buy down for what, however you market it.
This is another silly question about. I know there are a couple of items that the lender needs to pay with it. It's like always like.
You would want to make sure the lender does them. It could be that a lender doesn't. I think most of them do.
Oh.
But yeah, we certainly.
Like if it's with you.
Yeah, for
sure. Okay, yeah, we can do that.
And the other thing is, the one funky part about buy downs, and I guess I would say funky part on temporary buy downs, is that the whole amount has to be paid by either the seller or the buyer. You can't split it, like, so say on the, so, but I tell you that because you can get creative, but so say, 12,000, the seller's like, hey, we'll give you 10 grand. And then you're like, oh, they can't quite do it, they can't quite get the buy down covered. But we can look at their closing costs and say, okay, if their total closing costs, not counting the buy down, is 10 grand, which it usually is, then we can say, okay, we're the seller's cost for all that, and then the buyer pays. Yeah, so it's really just, moving the who's paying what. So you can still manage to cover most of it. Even if the seller's not doing the total exact amount, but it's just weird because you can't, a buy down in the system. Has to be either the buyer, or the seller. Yes, it has to be paid all that, it can't be like, oh, the buyer's paying 2,000 and the seller's paying 10. So we can just say, okay, the 10 grand is going toward all this other stuff, and then the buyer's paying this.
Have you seen people change this down in price just because something got negotiated with the seller, which, for example, they need an extra $2,000-3,000, they add it to the price. So I can tell the seller, hey, instead of 10, I need 13, but I
Yep.
have 3, and you have to pay all of it.
Yep.
Needs to be
You
used.
still raise the price by
Right.
2 grand. You can totally do that. And so the cool part is, back in the day, conventional did not allow you to do that unless you appraisal. Meaning, if you had a $500,000 contract price and that appraisal came in at 505, you were not then allowed, once the appraisal was in, to go back and amend it and say, oh, we're gonna do 505 and give 5 grand to them, now you can. So that's it.
FHA.
Huh?
FHA, the same thing?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's the cool part, because to me, it never made sense. Like, well, if you're telling me it's worth that much, then who cares? They're agreeing to say, okay, I wanna pay more, and then you cover my costs, But, so, yes, so now that's,
Hey, what do we need to do an amendment? And
Yep.
change the sales price?
yep, you just do an amendment that changes the sales price. And again, like any amendment, I don't wanna say vague, the more concise, the better. You could just do an amendment that says, you don't have to say, oh, appraised value came in, you don't have to, nope, just
So
say.
price change from.
Sales price has been changed from, 500 to 505, seller will contribute 5,000 or whatever it is that you've changed. So the cleaner the better.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a really cool thing. So I mean, that could be something that happens after the appraisal comes in, it could be something, obviously if you're doing an ATAC, maybe you're asking for stuff and they're just like, hey, I'd rather give you money. Now, if your buyer really wants to do those things, then they probably want that money for that. But, just, there's a lot of things to think about. And I think just getting creative and looking at your buyer situation, what is their hot button, what's super important to them? Maybe they're like, hey, I can do these, repairs myself. Maybe I'm really handy, I don't really need to pay someone to do it, but I still wanted that money because it needs to be done. And maybe I will take that money and do this or just pay for my cost and whatever. So I think just having those conversations, and have those conversations with us too. Like if you're like, hey, we're gonna get some money, like, what do you think? How should we apply it? Should we apply it to our closing costs? Because we're usually having a lot of the money conversations with those buyers and we know what their hot buttons are. Hey, we could look at buying the rate down. We could look at a temporary rate buy down. I think they might like that because they're, mostly concerned about their monthly payment. So those are all things that we can all kind of come together even and brainstorm about to figure out. But good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody have a question on Zoom land? You guys are all brilliant. I love it. And the other thing I'll say too, not really related to this, but that we will offer people, so we have little signs in our office too, if you guys have seen them, professional financing, feel free to put that in any of your listing, you can swing by and be like, hey, can I use that sign, that's why we have them. The other thing, and what that really means is, it could be just, we're trying to drive people either to talk about these products, and be like, hey, yeah, call them, we've got a possibility of $3,500 or $8,000 for your cost. Also, stuff like this, we can talk through this with them, because if they're getting seller paid closing costs and they're interested in something like this, you guys aren't going to be explaining it all. That's not your lane. We would never expect that, really just to let them know. And I'm like, let me introduce you to Erin. Exactly. That's all you gotta do. So that we can walk through all these options with them. It's crazy to me how many times I'll get someone who has talked to a lender Especially a first-time home buyer, and they still know nothing. Oh, yeah, I'm pre-approved with, Rocket or Chase or whoever, yeah, all cringe, but, and I'll be like, oh, have you gone through this, because I don't necessarily want to bore them if they're like, yeah, they already explained, what an escrow account is, this, so I'll always be asking them. But I mean, 9 times out of 10, even if they're already pre-approved somewhere, they have no clue. So they just aren't getting the consultation that we do that we normally do. So that can help, obviously letting them know what's available to them, how we can structure things differently for their situation. Structuring meaning, do we want to buy the breakdown? Do we not? We do the break even math with them. And we're talking about permanent buyouts, like, hey, okay, well, if you spent $5,000 to buy a breakdown of 4%, you're spending $5,000, you're saving, $50 a month. How many months, it's gonna take you 100 months to break even, meaning get that money back. Like, is that worthwhile? And I'm making those numbers, but that's what we're doing. We're figuring that out, saying, hey, it might be 37 months, it might be, 51 months before you, and that's just recouping the money you pay up front. After that point, now you're ahead every month, right? So we're kind of talking through that because people look at the rate and they're just be like, well, how much does it cost to buy this? And it's like, well, it costs this much, and yes, you can do that. Not saying, there's not right or wrong, but it's just a matter of walking them through all those steps to think about it. And some people throw like, yeah, that makes sense, but yeah, I think I still want to do that. Or, hey, I'm getting $5,000 from the seller, so I feel like they're paying for part of that. That's cool. And that's great. And some people are like, oh yeah, no, that's not. I'd rather just do the higher rate and, refinance. I think I'll be able to refinance before month 51, So those are the kinds of conversations we're having with clients, just so that they make the best decision. But, these are definitely more outside of the box kind of conversation anyways. But, to help on your listings, also, if you're listing something and it's not quite moving or, whatever, you're not getting as many offers, like we can do offer lender credits too. The whole use our preferred lender, get up to $3,000, $4,000, depending on the price. If you've got one that you want to list and you're like, hey, I'd really like to offer that, and call us. It'll depend on the price of the home. Obviously, the higher price homes, we can give more money because it's all a percentage. But this one too, we offered that. I offered $4,000 on that one. And we got that loan, like the buyers using us. Which the listing agent loved because he was originally pre-approved with Chase. Nobody wants to work with Chase. So, it's a win-win, and I think doing more and just, helping the buyers, helping them get into something that's comfortable for them. And, I think we're all pretty firm believers in that it's positive to buy a house. It's good for your life. It's good for your long-term wealth creation. It's good, we want everyone to do it, not just because we're in the business of selling houses and doing loans, but because I truly believe you're better off if you can get into the house. Even if you buy something, it's not your dream home the first time. That's okay. You just need to get in, kind of a thing. So these are kind of all the ways that we try to help people make that jump. And obviously, if they're not qualified, they're not. But if they are qualified and they've got kind of cold feet or they're nervous, it's not only, we show them the rent versus buy numbers, like, hey, if you keep renting and you're waiting for rates to go down, you're waiting for, prices to go down, like, we're having those conversations, like inventory, supply, demand, those prices aren't coming down.
It's funny, I was having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
As soon as I started here, they were like, I'm waiting for the rates to come down. It's 2 years ago. And probably around 50,000. Like, it's funny because
yeah.
It's
and the thing about it is like, could prices correct? Yeah, I suppose that could happen, but at the same time, unless you're buying investment properties to hold, to, just appreciation is the only thing you want. But if you're looking for a place to live as your home, that's different. It's kind of like having money in a 401k. You can't just watch it every day and be like, oh my gosh, it went down. Like, it's a long-term investment thing. It's there. And over time, it will be positive. Well, so will your house. Over time, all of the historical charts, everything shows that it will. Well, are there times in this, the cycle that, sure. But at the same time, if you're renting, like you're building nothing. So off the soapbox, but I get passionate. So anyway, these are 10 items. So just know that we can use those for your buyers, and if a great option for your sellers if you're trying to maybe help move a property or market it differently. Let me know. I can easily send you this kind of calculator if you want to have that conversation with a seller to be like, hey, this is how much it would cost to offer that. You can tell me the price of the home, and I'll send you this that has all, plug in the current rate, plug in the current your price, and then that's easy peasy. So yeah, that's all I had today. Do y'all have any other questions? All right, you guys, I'm going to just email, that's how I know who's in the class. I'm gonna email out to you guys these flyers, just so you have. Do you want me to send you the calculator too, just so you can see it? Okay, I'll just send that to you.
Do you have it was Alfred gave me a couple of books. I just didn't know how this weekend and I realized I'm using show.
Oh, the homebuyer kits?
Yeah.
So we don't
No.
have printed Onward. So you can totally still use the shelter ones and just put our parts on them. We've got. Yeah. Yeah. But that just actually brought it back to me, because I know they made an electronic one that we can send out now this time work. But I'm like, I think they were gonna be printing ones, but now that you asked that, I'm like, I haven't seen them. Probably
Yeah.
print them out.
Well, these books.
Yeah, but
These are really nice books with the pocket.
So it has like a folder here, and the pages were like,
Yeah.
it was like a booklet.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's having a couple of those, especially.
We should just get Onward stickers.
Oh.
Right from the shoulder. They have them under that. I know. Actually, not ideal, but.
It is nice.
Yeah. Stickers. I've never seen it. Yeah. Look at it.
It may have the
You
logo.
can put your logo and slap it over the shelter. Yeah. Hey. But, all right, y'all, I will send out the flyers that we went over, and I'll send out this calculator just so you guys can see it. But call me if you have questions or want to walk through it, or obviously if you have a buyer who, might benefit from one of these conversations, or if you've got a listing that might benefit from, offering something cool and outside the box to generate interest or offers. That's what we're here for.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Happy Monday, everybody. Happy belated Mother's Day to all the moms. Better? Better. Yeah. Much better. And Cam. Yeah.